so we can get our party started. Good evening, everyone. I'm Valerie Cabral, Director of Alumni Relations at Tandon. Thank you for joining Tandon Sip and Celebrate on this glorious NYU One Day. As you can imagine, it's a big day for us, and one that has a pretty lofty goal that I know with your help, we're going to get to. By joining us this evening, you're already helping. You're helping towards our day's goal of raising $75,000 in support of student scholarships, which will in turn unlock another $75K from two very generous alums, Charlie and Ravi. And I'll just refer to them by their first name because they're definitely family. And together with our 75 and their 75, we will have, for a grand total of 1 day worth of fundraising, $150,000. So, Allie, would you please put our giving chat in the box, our giving page in the box? And what it is actually the challenge page, which will give you an idea of where we are towards our goal. It will also allow those of you who didn't make a gift as of yet to make that gift. And it gives me an opportunity to thank all of you who have made your very generous gifts already, to tell you how grateful we are. So on behalf of the students who are going to benefit from all of this generosity, I thank you wholeheartedly for always being there, not just on one day, but always, because that's who you are. We're excited to have all of you here tonight for our special event that is being led by our CAS and Steinhardt alumna, Stephanie Staab. Now, just a little extra on Stephanie. She's not an engineer, but her husband is. So she is part of our family. She is our wine expert living and working in Southern California's wine country. And you're going to hear more about her from her directly. So I'm going to let that happen. Also lending himself tonight as moderator is Bill Hery. Bill is a computer science and mathematician who started his career with 6 years on our math faculty at the then Brooklyn Poly, now NYU Tandon, of course. And then he later went on to a career at Bell Labs, where he transitioned to computer science. After retiring from Bell Labs, he came back to Poly, Tandon, in the computer science department as a faculty member. He's a triple alum, like many of the people we have and we boast about. Along with, along the way, he developed a love of wine, and combining vineyard visits with vacations and business travel, he's done winery tastings in Bordeaux and the Rhone Valley, Barolo, Tuscany, Hungary, Croatia, Chile, New Zealand, California, Oregon, and even, believe it or not, New York State. And me, why am I here? Well, I'm here to drink some wine, hopefully make another gift, because the spirit might hit me. I might want to do a little more to get us to our goal. I hope to eat some nibbles. And really, I just want to hear about how to enjoy even more wine and to do it properly. So without further ado, let's get to class. I don't want us to be too late. Stephanie and Bill, take it away.
Hey, welcome. Thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Stephanie, and as Valerie said, I am an NYU graduate. I did my bachelor's degree in art history and architecture with a French minor, and I did my master's degree in art history. And I actually fell in love with wine at NYU during study abroad in France. And the first wines that I was ever drinking was actually Bordeaux wine in Bordeaux. So that's definitely one of my favorites to this day and included in our class today. I'm originally from Southern California. I lived in New York for about 15 years and Europe for about 5 years. And now I've been back here in California working and living in wine country for the past 5 years. So it's all coming together, and it's really interesting, I think, to look at the world through the vision of wine. And as Valerie said, my husband, he has a master's in engineering and a master's in business. So, and he works with technology out here. So he definitely gets into the technical side of wine tasting and things like that. And Bill, I don't know if you wanted to say a little something before we started our tasting.
Well, I think Valerie gave a nice introduction. She knows me well from working with her over the years. As she said, I really got very interested in wine on a business trip. My wife's business trip to Paris, and before that, I had just been drinking, whatever the house red is when I went to a restaurant, and it was okay. It was pleasant, but nothing exciting. In Paris, what we wound up doing was going to restaurants where we could buy a half bottle, which is really all how much we needed. And I said, this is so much better than those glasses that I get in US. What are they? And it turned out they were all Bordeaux. So my first love of wine was Bordeaux also. And I've since branched out to a lot of other things, including Oregon Pinot Noir, as we're tasting today, Barolo, lots of other good wines.
That's so funny that you say that, Bill, and that was very interesting to find out. And I think for me, growing up in the US, I definitely grew up in a family that didn't drink wine, never had that as part of our culture. And when I went to France, I just saw how it was just part of the culture. As Bill said, you go to a cafe, everyone's drinking wine with their lunch, dinner. It's just part of the lifestyle. And as I traveled through Europe, I saw that that's how people welcomed hospitality into their homes. And every time you'd have a dinner, there would be a wine that was paired with it on purpose. And people would tell you the story about, where this wine came from and how it goes with the food that they made. And so I have a lot of memories that link wine with food. And so for me, I think I have a very European outlook where wine isn't just for drinking, but it's for the social component, and it's definitely meant to go with food. So I wanted to show you the charcuterie plate that I put together for today. Here's my example. I have a selection of, I picked a goat brie, an aged Gouda, and a Manchego. And then I have some fruit. I have strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, some grapes, some nuts, some honey, and some prosciutto for a little salty flavor. So I hope you guys at home were able to find some little things to snack on while you have your class. I did recommend 3 wines. A white wine, a Viognier to start with. I heard that we have some whiskey drinkers in the crowd, so I thought that this is kind of like a white wine you don't hear about too much, but it's a very interesting one. And if you don't have it, don't worry. You can, whatever wine you have, you can follow along with a tasting, ask questions, things like that. It's supposed to just be kind of like an open format event for you guys. So I'm going to start with the white wine, the Viognier, and then move to the Pinot Noir, and then move to the Bordeaux. So whatever you have at home, you can feel free to taste along with me, or start with whatever you do happen to have. In wine tasting, what you're going to want to do is start from white to red, and lighter bodied to more full bodied, and dry to sweet. So this is going to be a dry white wine, which means it's not sweet. So that's a technical term. So I wanted to start by opening the wine. And I wanted to show you, I've had a lot of gadgets over the years, but actually working at a winery, my favorite tool, you might have seen one of these at a restaurant. So these very simple tools you can use, and it's actually my favorite. And I always take it when I travel too. Okay, so you've got your wine. This I had chilled in the refrigerator, but I took it out about 20 minutes before our event. One thing that we tend to do without realizing it is chill our wines till they're freezing cold. Now, if you do that, you're not going to get as many fruit flavors with your wine or aromas. And the same thing for champagne really any white. So a little trick is to take it out so it's not so cold. Okay, so what we're gonna do is you're gonna take your opener, you're gonna take the cutting part here, and you're gonna put it right under the lip, right here. Okay, so then you're gonna turn your bottle so you cut all around it. And you'll get your corkscrew part, put that in, twist it. And there you go. Okay, so now I do have a couple different glasses. So depends on how much space you have. If you have a house and you love wine, then I definitely recommend getting a couple different styles of glasses. So what I like to look for is very thin. The thinner, the better. So I have this one for a white wine, and I have this one for my red wine. If you were in an apartment, you could just get something like this. So it slopes at the top, and you have a large bowl so that you can aerate your wine, but then direct the aromas to your nose. So it just depends on how much space you have and your interest level in wine. Okay, so we're gonna start by pouring our wine. Okay, and you don't have to fill it all the way up. So you're gonna take your wine. Now, many of you have probably heard of the term sommelier. So that's a term of a professional wine person. And we're gonna learn the 5 S's of wine tasting, which is how the sommeliers do it. Okay, so here is the order. So you're gonna see, swirl, sniff, sip, and savor. So you might think, well, wine tasting is just about my mouth, but you're using all your other senses as well. So we're gonna take a look at it first. So a white wine can range from almost clear to almost like a dark yellow. And so different grapes are gonna give you different colors. Some are lighter, some are darker, or other factors could be involved, such as if something was aged in oak, or if it was aged longer, or if it's older, that could be make a white wine a little bit darker. So if we're gonna look at the wine I have here, this is 2018. That's called the vintage. So what that means is that is the year when the grapes were picked. So we're in 2021, so that was 3 years ago. This one happens to be from France, but as I said in the notes, you could have a Viognier from anywhere. Other choices could be a Sauvignon Blanc, a Gewürztraminer, a Riesling, or a Muscat. So these are all aromatic grapes. And what's so fun with these is going to be in our next step. After we swirl it, when we sniff it, you're going to see the aromas are very interesting. So, all right, so we looked at our wine, and it looks like a nice light yellow color. I don't see any brown or dark colors. We know it's still a pretty young wine. White wines tend to be aged in stainless steel, so you keep pure fruit flavors. There's some that could be aged a little bit with oak, sometimes Viognier is, sometimes Chardonnay is. And it just gives a little extra flavor, but most white wines are just gonna be just focusing on their pure fruit flavor. Okay, so the next step, you're gonna wanna swirl it, get some air in there. Now, if this is too scary for you, a trick that you can do is set your wine glass down on your table and swirl the base around. Faster than this, obviously. So swirl it around, and then the wine, you can aerate it, but you don't have to worry about spilling it if you're not confident in your wrist skills. So the reason we want to swirl is to get some air in there. That wine has been in the bottle, this one, you know, for a couple years. We just want to kind of unlock those aromas. So the next step is going to be take your wine glass and put your nose inside of it. Don't be afraid. Put it all the way in and sniff. Take a big smell. Okay, so see what you smell. Like, what kind of other fruits can you smell from the wine? And people will ask, did you add, like, did the winemakers add fruit flavors to the wines? No. So it's just compounds. It comes from compounds in the grapes that are similar to chemical compounds in other fruits. So there's not, it's only grapes. They didn't add extra flavoring to it. But it can come across as different smells or flavors. And it's just to do with the grape. Okay, so now try it again. And you could do this with your red wine if you don't have a white wine. So you're gonna smell it again. This time I want you to open your mouth when you smell, okay? So you're gonna smell and then see if you can almost taste the wine on the back of your tongue, the back by your throat, okay? So you're gonna smell and you're gonna let the air come in with your mouth open. Did anyone notice that? It's really crazy, yeah. So that's kind of like a fun little trick. Okay, so we swirled, we smelled, we saw. Now we get to sip. So what I want you to do, take a sip, however you wanna do it. Okay, so we get the flavor, okay. Okay, now this time, I want you to sip again, and I want you to like almost chew on the wine, swirl it around like mouthwash. Couple seconds, put it in your mouth. So you want to coat all your taste buds. And now, did you taste that even more? Like, makes your mouth water more because you're getting all the different taste buds. Okay, now we're going to do another kind of sip. What we're going to do, you're going to put it in your mouth. And then you're gonna take air into your mouth and you're gonna make a gurgling sound. Like this. Okay, ready? Try not to choke because you could, you know, if you're not careful. Give it a try, come on. You can do it with your red wine too. Now, how interesting was that? We really, really get all the flavors. And that way, the flavors kind of linger in your mouth. And I think that's like a really neat trick. And you can do that. You can do that anytime that you open a bottle of wine to really taste it. And then you'll get really into the flavors that go with that. Okay, so also throughout this event, whatever like your cheese board, feel free to, there's no, according to me, there's no correct matches. I think that pretty much all cheeses and wines taste really good together. You can really get into like nitty gritty if you want to pair specific cheeses, but try taking like a piece of cheese or a piece of meat, whatever you have, you know, or something a little bit sweet, and see how it changes the wine. So the way that we're going to want to do the wine tasting is, I'm going to take a piece of cheese. Okay, so you always want to taste your wine first, and then you're going to want to taste your food, taste your wine again. Now, what you're gonna wanna do is put your food in your mouth and put your wine in your mouth at the same time. So it's not just a beverage. So think of it like if you had a French fry and some ketchup. Would you eat your French fry and then eat a scoop of ketchup? No, you're gonna dip it in and like eat it all at the same time. So that's what we're gonna do with our wine. Okay, so we're gonna take a little bite right here, chew, get some wine. Mix it together. And how did that change the way your wine tasted, right? So for me, wine and food is like a partnership. And that's why it is fun to do wine and food pairings. Okay. So let's see here. I'm just checking my notes here. So, and as Valerie said, like if anyone has any questions throughout the event, you can feel free to ask them as we go or at the end. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the next one, I was thinking we could do our red wines. So I have here, I have the Pinot Noir from Oregon, US, and I have a Bordeaux from France. So, why is it called Pinot Noir versus Bordeaux? Okay, so that comes down to labeling. So if we're gonna talk about the US or other, they call them New World areas, so that's gonna be places outside of Europe, basically we go by the varietal. So varietal means the kind of grape. So in this case, Pinot Noir, that is the grape. And as we saw before, so then here's the location, Willamette Valley, Oregon. And then right here, 2019, that's gonna be your vintage. So that again was the year that the grapes were picked. So we can take this wine, pour it in our glass. And again, you can go through the steps of looking at it. You can hold it up to a light, if you have one, and look at it, or you can hold it over something white, like a white piece of paper is really handy, or if you have like white countertops. So you'll notice with this wine that it's a lot lighter color. It's like a ruby red color. I'm gonna go ahead and pour my Bordeaux at the same time. So if you guys have two wines at home, you can go ahead and do this as well, okay? So here, I have a Bordeaux, and I said for the class, any Bordeaux is fine. These have, there's 5 different grapes that can be used. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. And they can be used in different percentages, but they're always gonna be those grapes. So for the labeling, what we're saying is that if you're in the New World, you're gonna say the varietal. And if you're in Europe, you're gonna say the area, the location where it's from. And then you're gonna have to know, you're gonna have to do your research and find out what grapes do they use in those wines. Okay, so I wanna pour this one too.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Could you repeat that about the region?
For sure. Okay. So it's really interesting because European winemaking has gone back for so long. And I think that's one of the things that really attracts me to French wine, for example. So grapes have been grown for so long. They know exactly what kind of grapes grow where and make what kind of wine. So they know exactly what kind of slope, and if it's facing south to get more sun, or if it's in a valley to get mist for a certain kind of sweet wine or things like that. And it's highly regulated. So often you won't even be allowed to add irrigation. So that would be supplemental water. For example, where I live in Temecula, Southern California wine country, it's really hot. It's like 120 degrees here in the summer. It's crazy. But we do have an ocean mist that comes in at night that cools the grapes. And, but we have to use irrigation here because there would be no way the grapes would grow without water. Okay. So, but in Europe and throughout much of history, maybe people didn't have, irrigation to give to their grapes. So these rules have evolved over time. And that's why you're going to have all these different little areas that are going to be very specific in their regulations and their rules. And that's because they want to give a quality product and a consistent product. So things will vary by the year depending on Mother Nature and how much it rained or how sunny it was and when they were able to pick the grapes. But overall, you're going to have those rules in place. So in the New World, and like in the US, for example, it's so much newer that we're making wine over here. So everything is kind of like experimentation still. I feel like we're still kind of in that stage. So something that was very attractive to me about this Pinot Noir is that it's actually done by a family from Burgundy, France. And Burgundy is the most famous place for Pinot Noir. But those are going to be like $100 a bottle. Okay, so we got this one for around 20. The goal of this class was to show that we could have excellent wines for $20 or under. And we accomplished that with a variety of different kinds of wines. So this family, they came from Burgundy. And so Pinot Noir, you might have heard, is a grape that grows in cold weather. So where I live, we cannot grow Pinot Noir because it's too hot. So back to what I was explaining about France and the different locations and what they grow where, they have a word called terroir. And terroir means that, in the French opinion, everything that goes into making the grape goes into the final flavor of the wine. So Pinot Noir is very well known for being influenced by terroir because it has a very thin skin and it needs to grow in a cool climate. And so you're going to be experiencing more of that, of what the terroir, of what went into it, the climate and the dirt. There's all different kinds of soil and dirt and rock that influence the way that your final wine is going to taste. So anyway, so this Oregon is like very, very cold. I know Bill had asked a question about what's the difference between Pinot Noir from Northern California and Pinot Noir from Oregon. Well, in Burgundy, as I said, it's going to be super cold. And the Pinot Noir is going to love it there. So people that came out to the US and tried to replicate like where would be a good location for me to plant these kind of vines, they found in Oregon, it's very cold. They could get a long growing season there and they would be able to impart that terroir into the flavor of the wine. Whereas so when you're going to try your Pinot Noir, you're going to get a very subtle flavor. Versus if you have a Pinot Noir from Northern California, it's still pretty cool up there, but it also gets warmer in the daytimes. So that's going to bring out more of the fruit, like a juicier, stronger fruit flavor. It won't be as subtle. So then that's going to be about that. Okay, so I just want to show you before we tasted that, if you're going to compare two wines at home, what you're going to want to do is get the same size glasses and pour your wine to the same level. So that's what I did here with my two wines. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, please hold your wine. I think you're all doing it, but hold it by the stem. I see we're all experts here. That's good. It drives me crazy, like on movies, and it's like, didn't they research this? But you don't want to get your fingerprints on the glass because then you can't see the color as well. And you don't want to heat up the wine while you're trying to taste it. So it's kind of fun. If you take two and then you can, look at the colors. If you guys have both of these, you can see how the Pinot Noir, it's almost clear around the edges, the nice red ruby color. Then you have your Bordeaux from wherever it is. It's going to be predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. So those are both going to be heavier wines. You have like a darker color there. It's a little bit, almost like a little bit more towards the, brown side. I'm not saying it's brown, but I'm saying it's not as like purpley color. So if you can see those two, you can see how they're different. Okay, I'm gonna put that down. So again, you can take your wine, swirl it on your table, and stick your nose in. And see what you smell. So this, I have the Pinot Noir. So nothing is right and nothing is wrong. It's whatever you personally smell. And interestingly enough, the more that you try different foods and go to like the farmer's market and try fresh produce and fruits, you'll smell and taste more things in your wine. You'll have a better wine drinking experience. So this, we're gonna get like cherry, berry, maybe rhubarb. Sometimes your, what you smell, it's usually similar to what you're tasting. Not always, you might pick up some different things. But so you can do the same thing with your smelling with your nose all the way inside and then swirl it around in your mouth. Okay, so that's like really soft flavor, just really light oak on there. The way the process that red wine is made is that if you actually look at a grape for red wine, they're clear on the inside. The juice is actually clear, and all of the pigment and tannins come from the skins. So when you're making white wine, you take the grapes and you crush them and you take the juice right away and then you ferment it. When you take red wine, you take the grapes, you crush them and you leave them with their skins. So they soak with their skins. They start off in stainless steel tanks. It's actually really neat where I work in wine country. I work at a winery. And so I get to see the process of the grapes growing and then being harvested and then crushed and produced. So I see the whole process every year, and it's really neat. But what they do, they go in stainless steel tanks, and there's a process called a pump over. So they actually take all the juice out, pump it over the top and put it back in. So what you're doing is creating alcohol, and you're macerating those skins in for the color and texture and flavor. The way that wine is made is from the yeast, which naturally occurs on the skins, fermenting with the sugars. So grapes, you're heating them up. That's why they love to grow in a warm sun. You're heating up the sugars in the grapes with the sun. When they reach a certain level, that's when you pick them. Then we do add extra yeast so that we can get to a certain level. And that's why, so for example, this wine is dry, not sweet, because the yeast have been allowed to eat all of the sugar in the wine. So like with a sweet wine, they tend to be lower in alcohol because you can stop the yeast at a certain point if you want. But these are allowed to keep eating all the sugars until they're done. And that's how we get a dry wine. So anyway, so you have them in the steel tank. Then you're gonna take them, the juice, it's like a couple weeks that they do that. And then after that, they're gonna take all the juice out and filter out the skins. And then that's when the juice is gonna go into oak barrels. And it's actually really crazy because it's not just so simple with oak barrels. So it's like a very traditional craft where they're completely handmade. There's no way to machine make a barrel. So they're called staves, and they're skinny pieces of wood that are then heated with fire, and they call it toasting. And there's different levels of toasting depending on how strong of a flavor you want to add to your wine. And then there's also, so that's usually what they call a new oak, where they're toasting it. You have French or American are the predominant ones. And sometimes in Europe, people will use aged oak, where it no longer imparts a flavor, where it just allows oxygen to come through. So when you have like a white wine, you have stainless steel, no oxygen can get through stainless steel. But when you have your red wine, it's really nice. Most red wines are aged in oak. And so like if you're using a new oak, you're gonna get other flavors. Anything that's not a fruit flavor comes from your wood. So if you ever have like vanilla or cinnamon, anything that's like that, like baking spice, that would all come, that would be a contribution from the oak. So anyway, in something like this, Pinot Noir, it's super light. So you're only gonna want a light oak so that you don't overwhelm the delicate fruit flavors. And I do have some pairing suggestions for you guys that I was thinking about for these wines. So let's see, for the Pinot Noir, I wanted to mention that a lot of people think that you've probably heard, oh, white wine with fish, red wine with meat, right? Has anyone heard that? Yeah, okay, so it's kind of funny. I mean, that can be a rule of thumb, but what I've learned in working in the wine industry is that there's so many different pairings you can do. So for example, with a rule of thumb is going to be that it's the body that matters. So what do I mean by body? Some people compare wine's body to like skim milk versus whole milk. For me, that's like kind of a weird comparison, but if you think about that in your mouth, like how does it feel in your mouth? So if you have both of these, try a sip of your Pinot Noir and then try a sip of your Bordeaux and just see how that feels in your mouth. So what you can do is, I think like a great pairing with a lighter red is like salmon, if you like fish, like that's really nice. Or you can do like a cream sauce or something with, you know, a little bit of mushrooms or things like that. And what I like to do for my food pairings is you can do it two ways, I feel like. So you can search, you can start with your wine and then make your food to go with your wine, or you can start with your food and then find wine to go with that. And what I like to do is what we've been doing here is to take, you know, maybe two different wines so you can compare them. And what would be really fun is, say you want to do your Pinot Noir tasting at home. Well, you could try maybe a Pinot Noir from Oregon and a Pinot Noir from Northern California or from Burgundy, and see how does Pinot Noir taste from two different places. Or actually Bordeaux blends are very popular in California. So in Napa and also down here in Southern California, you could try a California Bordeaux blend versus a Bordeaux from France. So that's really fun. Or another fun thing to do is to try a wine from the same producer. So like, for example, maybe I would get this Cloudline, but I'd get it in two different vintages. Open them up and then try with two different glasses like we just looked at, and see what do the flavors, how are they subtly different. So you can do that, and you can just make a whole event out of it. Because I know we were talking about like, oh my gosh, like I've been home during the pandemic and, you know, it gets so old just like staring at your walls all the time. But that's like really fun. And it kind of gives purpose to your night instead of just like, oh, what are we going to make for dinner, you know, tonight? I guess I'll just, you know, heat something up quickly. But then you can, okay, so then what I like to do is go on Google, right? And you can search like food pairings for Pinot Noir. And then make a list of things that sound really good to you, right? So, you know, pick a couple of things. And I like to make like two things. So maybe like an appetizer and a main dish. So pick out, you have your Pinot Noir, and then you're gonna start, you know, with your appetizer, and then you're gonna move on into your main dish. And then you'll try your two Pinot Noirs side by side by themselves first, then taste them with your appetizer, then taste them both with your dinner as well. And I feel like when you do that, you're really gonna create memories for your taste buds, like your brain and your taste buds will work together, and you're really gonna remember that wine. Because I feel like if you just have a wine with dinner, you're gonna say, oh yeah, that wine was really good, but you're not gonna remember it as much. And you can even find online, just find like tasting guide, and you can just write in, like try it yourself, like color, aroma, taste. you know, try it yourself and see like what flavors you come up with. And you can keep a little notebook, and it's a really fun activity. And then like after the pandemic, after we were able to socialize again, it's also a really fun activity you can do with friends. You could get together and like one person, you know, agree on a wine, a type of wine beforehand. You bring a bottle or two, they have a bottle, and then you bring the appetizer, they have the main dish, but you do it together and then again, go through the tasting notes. And it's a really fun activity, and it's fun. It's not that expensive to do at home. So that's a definite recommendation that I have.
And I add some of my own experience with something like that. What I like to do, my wife and I and another couple, we will get together and plan in advance, and we will each bring a bottle of a similar kind of wine. 2 bottles is enough for the 4 of us. Very often we've done it with either 2 from the same area or 2 from different areas that are somewhat similar, like a California Cabernet versus a Bordeaux from the left bank, which is primarily Cabernet. And what we do is we will decant the wines at the beginning of the evening, and we'll just start sipping them slowly. We'll have 2 glasses each, and we will see how the wines evolve over time and how they compare over time with the various courses, etc. And over the course of a couple of hours, you get to appreciate not only the differences between the 2 wines, but how the wines actually evolve over time. This is particularly true for red wines and Bordeaux and Cabernets. When they're open, they keep evolving. And we've had tastings where we've compared wines, and over a period of 2 hours, at first one wine is definitely better. And then as time goes on, the second one opens up more, and the second winds up being the better one. And that's a lot of fun to do if you can find wines that are really compatible with each other. So it should be the same primary grapes. You could do the same thing with a Oregon Pinot Noir and a Burgundy. And you can get good Burgundies for $30, $40, $50. You have to go $100. You can get some pretty good ones. Compare that against a better Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley and see how the differences of it. Again, do it over time, not just over different foods. And we've had a lot of fun doing that.
I definitely agree with that. And thank you for bringing that up, Bill. It's so fascinating that wine is like, it's like alive. You know, and it evolves over time. And that's a really good point, that it will change throughout the course of a couple hours. So that is interesting to watch for. And as Bill was saying, it can be interesting to decant your wines, and that's a form of adding, for 2 reasons. Either you can be adding air to a wine, and as I was saying, that helps it breathe and open up the flavors and aromas. And it can also be used for older wines that might have sediment in them, and you want to gently be able to drink them without having sediment. But we're probably not talking about those kind of wines right now. I did want to show you guys. So a friend of mine has, okay, depends again for if you have a decanter, they can be really beautiful, but they can also be really intimidating because they're like so thin and large. It depends on how much space you have. If you have a house or an apartment, you might not have room for that. Depends on your kitchen, right? So a friend of mine, I don't have this gadget, but has a gadget that goes on top of your wine bottle, and you turn it over, and it aerates the wine, and then you turn it back over, puts it back into the bottle, and without a decanter, it actually has aerated your whole bottle. So that's kind of fun. And then I wanted to show you a couple of tools that I have that's kind of fun. This is from the Rabbit company, that they make openers, but this is just like, I think it can be fun. It has aerates your wine. You just stick it in, and then you can just pour your wine. So there's one. And then this is kind of a fun one that I got for a gift, and it pours out of his mouth, but it aerates at the same time. So there can be, fun things you can do with aerating your wine. There's a lot of little accessories when you start getting into wine tasting.
Yeah, well, I'd like to add to that. I think part of the purpose of the aeration is to get the air mixed with the wine, and over time that helps the wine evolve more. So just pouring it through and aerating it once probably isn't the same as putting it in a decanter and leaving it in a decanter and tasting it over a period of a couple of hours to see how it changes.
Right, and then that's
like
also why we're going to do like our swirling, and
yep,
that's why you're going to want to have a you don't want a tiny wine glass, so you're going to want to have, you know, it's pretty big wine glass, but you don't fill it up that far, and then, you know, it has plenty of surface area for the air to mingle with it. And again, you know, you can keep swirling it throughout the evening and doing it little sniffs.
Hi, Stephanie. This is great. Thank you. So, you know, I put a little question earlier in the chat. Could you talk about the significance of the tiers? I've been to a couple of classes and I still don't quite get what the tiers mean.
Oh, sure.
And what's significant.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, okay. So, tiers, like crying, like wah, and they can also be called legs. So that's going to be, so, okay. I wonder if you can see on mine. Once I swirled. So if you look in your glass, it's going to be like where you swirled. It's like a layer. There's like a ring, and then they're coming down.
Those are nice.
See that? Look in your own glass. Maybe swirl a little bit more, and then give it a moment, and then take a look. Probably do it with your Bordeaux, probably more than your Pinot Noir.
Well, I'm drinking the Cloudline 2017 and it's got plenty of tears.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. And drink it with whatever wine you have, that'll work. So that's just like another fun thing to look at when you're investigating your wine. It doesn't mean anything about quality, but it can show you like if a wine is sweet, for example, if it's sweet, it's gonna be thicker, and then you will get those legs because it will take time to go down. And it can also show you if it's higher in alcohol, and that's going to affect just how fast that they go down. So it's kind of just more like a party trick, or if you're doing a blind tasting, something like that. It's just a way to get to know your wine better. But it doesn't have anything to do with the quality. It's just going to show either if it's sweeter or if it has more or less alcohol.
So if it has more alcohol in it, are the tiers thinner and do they run down faster?
Yeah. So you're going to have, when you have more alcohol, because see, these are both pretty high alcohol. For example, you can find your alcohol percentage. It's going to be on the back of your wine. So, okay, so 13.5% on our Pinot Noir. That's actually like medium for red wine. So that's going to be like, that's usually what the French wines are. But then this one, I have 14.5%. That's what a lot of the wines out here in my warm climate Temecula are more around 14, 15%. But yeah, so you'll just get like the slower legs with the higher alcohol.
Okay. So Stephanie, it's Valerie. I'm gonna jump in. There's a few questions in the box that you haven't quite touched upon during your talk. So I am going to, because we're such an intimate group, I want this to be interactive. I'm just going to pick folks and ask them to jump in and ask their own questions.
Perfect.
And I will begin with Alan Lawrence. So unmute yourself and ask your question, Alan. Okay, I guess I'll come back to Alan. So I'll go into the questions, but I have a few of my own. Given the fact that we're all handling life in a pandemic and we're not necessarily dining out the way we used to, we're enjoying some comfort foods at home, either that we're preparing ourselves or we're trying to support our neighborhood restaurants and businesses. Can you suggest a few things? Being that we're in New York and we do a lot of pizza and burgers and Italian pastas, we do Indian. do you have some suggestions of wines that complement spicy takeout or a good, rich, juicy, fatty burger? Because those are my go-tos. So I was wondering if you could help me match a nicely priced bottle with a really juicy all beef burger.
Well, I love this question, Valerie, because it's true. So you can only cook so much at home. Because I don't know if you're like me, but you end up making the same things. You're like, I think I just had that last week. Anyway, I've been a huge fan of takeout lately for some variety. And I definitely do miss New York City with a really good variety of authentic foods. But pretty much you can find a wine to pair with any kind of food. So something that's really fun. Okay, let's start with pizza, for example. So I like to do, or pizza and Italian food. What I like to say is that wine has been developed throughout time along with foods, right? So you can never go wrong if you're doing more of a traditional pairing wines with the kind of foods that would have come from that area where the wine came from, right? So I really like to pair Italian wines with Italian food. And I kind of mix and match, but like, that's why, you go to the pizza restaurant, they have like the jug of Chianti, but you don't have to necessarily get like the jug. Like there's some nice Chiantis out there. And there's some interesting Italian varietals, like Barbera is really interesting. You have some different kinds of blends. I like a super Tuscan is really fun. That's some people that decided, like, we don't want to only do what tradition tells us. And so, you can, like a Sangiovese grape is like going to be like a lot thinner and more acidic. And so that is going to, it cuts through, acidity is going to cut through fat, and the acidity is going to match the acidity in the tomato sauce. But anyway, so super Tuscan is going to be your Sangiovese, but plus with Bordeaux varietals like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. So it gives it like a little bit richer flavor. So if you haven't tried a super Tuscan, they're really good. I would definitely recommend that with a pizza or some Italian food. Something really, really fun to try with Thai food. If you like spicy food, if you try a sweet wine with spicy, you can either match like sweet with sweet, or, like a light wine with a light texture food, or you can do the opposite. So spicy with sweet. If you try to do like a red wine with Thai food, it's really gross, in my opinion. Because the thing is, the Thai flavors, like the spices and the flavors are really strong. So in my opinion, they can easily overwhelm wine. But if you get like a sweet Muscat, a sweet Gewürztraminer, a sweet Riesling, those are all aromatic grapes. So if you tried the Viognier today, aromatic is like where you really get like a lot of the floral notes, fruit, but with the sweet, you'll be really surprised. It tastes really good together. So I think that's a super fun pairing. And I think for Indian food, if you get something that's not too spicy, dry Viognier, or even like, I think a dry Riesling would be really good with that, because you have the complex flavor of like the spices, plus you're gonna have that aromatic white wine. Trying to think of
those suggestions are great.
Yeah.
I'm back to the inbox, and Alan Lawrence has put in his question, and it says, which do you feel is more important, the domain/winemaker or the terroir?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I feel like it kind of has to be a marriage. I feel like they're both important. So like if we're talking about Europe, as I said, I love drinking Bordeaux wines because I know it's going to be a certain way, and that I know it's going to be good. It's going to go with food. Whereas, for example, like in Southern California, there's like, we have really interesting wines being made out here. There's so many different varietals. Like if you're not familiar with the region, it's kind of confusing, like what's good out here, you know? So I think what's really fun to discover that is if you can go on a trip, like a wine tasting trip, and actually buy wines. So like if you're in New York, you know, go out to some wineries and then, you know, take notes while you're tasting and then bring some bottles home. And that's like, for me, that's like a really fun way to do it, because then you're going to have the memories of, you know, when you visited somewhere, and then you'll be able to, you know, still taste that at home too. But I would say, you know, like try different regions. And if you find you like a certain style of wine, you know, you can try different producers within that region. And if you look online, like, you know, you could start with producers that are more famous. And I always like to say that take advantage of the people who work at the wine store. So in New York, you have like specialized wine stores, and we have them out here in California too. And I really prefer those to the grocery store because, you know, they could tell you about small producers that you've never heard of, or you could say like, I really liked this kind of wine. Like, do you have anything else you think I might like? And I think that's a really good way to start exploring wines, because it can be overwhelming because there are so many different wines in different areas. And then like, say you liked this, you know, Pinot Noir, for example. I'm really, the next kind of Pinot Noir I want to try that I haven't tried yet is from New Zealand. So that's like a very cool climate, and they're supposed to have really interesting Pinot Noir. So it will, your wine journey will kind of evolve based on what you've tried. That's why it's really nice. I just keep a list of notes in my iPhone actually, so I can search it. Mm-hmm. And then for me, that's how I stay organized, you know, and you can, because it's kind of hard to remember, like, what did I like? What wasn't that into? So I think that that's kind of like an approach that you could use.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the box, and this one is from Anthony Concolino. And it says, do you have experience comparing a tenant from Uruguay with one from France?
No, not at all. That's very unique. I'd love to hear your background of, have you tried that?
Tony, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and jump in, but if you'd like to, please do.
I don't have experience comparing them, but my wife fell in love with Tannat when we went to visit our son and family when he was stationed in Uruguay.
Wow.
And
yeah, that's what I'm saying about, you know, the memories and travel.
All the bottles of Tannat, and then my son, every time he visited us, he had to bring more because she loved it. You can tell.
Yeah. And then because we were in New York, we lived in New York, we were at a wine store, Zacky's in Scarsdale, where they said the Tannat, the grapes are originally from France, and they were imported from France to Uruguay. And I've never tasted anything so wonderful. And I'm not a wine connoisseur whatsoever. We get, you know, Josh from California, we are happy as can be. and then I said, whoa, what is this wonderful thing? Anyway.
And you know, sometimes it can be like a blending grape that's used in France becomes, like, for example, Malbec, right? Is part of your Bordeaux blend. It's not even the major grape. But then you take it to, you know, somewhere in the New World, and then it's isolated. It's like, oh, that's, you know, just Malbec. And you're like, wow, it takes on a life of its own. So yeah, definitely different varietals and different locations and how they're handled. And if they're blended, makes a huge difference.
Thank you. Stephanie, this is a part 2. You answered the question about how do you salvage unused wine. You haven't finished your bottle of wine. Not something, none that happens at my house, but so, aerate
right?
and put it away. I guess Maureen wants to know how long does that last? How long will it keep?
Well, okay, so here's some other tools I want to show you guys. Okay, so these are so awesome. You can buy this at a wine store or online, like at Amazon. I got mine at Amazon. Okay, so this is just a simple tool that you put it in your bottle. Serious, and then you can suck out the air. When it makes that noise, that means it sucks the air out. So, and there's other devices you can use as well, but basically the reason wine goes bad, so to speak, is oxygen, just oxygen interacting with it. And so then you could keep this for like a couple days out on your counter, like a week in your refrigerator, and it will be perfectly delicious to drink. Or you can cook with your wine. You can, you know, if it's been a little while and you're like, oh, you know, taste it first. See, like, does this still taste good? You know, and if it doesn't taste good to you, you don't want to waste your time drinking it, okay? So you can use it to like, you can marinate meat with it that you're gonna barbecue, or you can cook. Like one of my favorite things to make that I learned to make from my French friend, it's called boeuf bourguignon. And it's basically just like beef chunks, carrots, and potatoes. And you just you can pour like half a bottle of wine in there. You cook it for a long time. So there's plenty of recipes that you can cook with wine, or you can make like a sauce. So you can actually just like look that up on the internet too. Or you can also make sangria out of it, which is a little insider advice. Like I never really order a sangria at restaurants because it does tend to be, you know, wines that are a couple days old, and but it's no problem. But I'm saying it's really fun at home, or even if it's a wine that you didn't like that much, you know, sangria is like a really fun way that you can do something with the wine in addition to cooking. So cooking is probably like my first go-to.
All right.
And I had a couple of my own tips for used, what we call used wine, meaning a bottle that you didn't finish. My wife and I tend to finish, or want to finish, about 3/4 of a bottle of wine. And over the years, I used to save these little quarter bottle things that you got on the airlines before they switched to pouring for full bottles. So we've got bottles that hold 1/4 bottle of wine. So I will put some aside in that, fill it up so there's no oxygen in there, and put the cap on that and save that. And it keeps much better than leaving it in the bottle. You can also do the same thing with half bottles. I have, you know, sometimes we just want a half bottle of wine. So I will, before I decant, I'll just put half a bottle aside and a half bottle, put the top on without much air in there. And again, it keeps much better. So if you can try to store it someplace without air, that prevents the oxygenation. The things that extract the air, those are good. The problem with them is that it's a very aromatic wine. It tends to pull out the aromatics too. So you don't get the aromatics the next time when you have the rest of the bottle. So I tend to go for putting things in a small bottle rather than pumping the air out. And the expensive,
that's a fun idea.
You can actually get systems where you replace the air with nitrogen or something else that's not going to interact with the wine, but those tend to be expensive and inconvenient.
Yeah, so yeah, like Bill's saying, so it kind of just depends on like how, you know, serious you get into your wine journey and how much wine you can drink in a night.
It's how much you want to drink, not how much you can drink.
Well, I'm looking at the clock. I know we're all enjoying this and we're all learning a lot, but I think it's about time we wrap things up. So I want to thank everyone for coming, but I certainly want to give thanks to Bill and of course to Stephanie for sharing their perspectives on wine. And obviously they're both lovers of wine and they know a lot and they've learned a lot. And I hope that you tonight have learned something new about wine. I'm looking at the chat box and I know that some folks have felt that they have learned some things they didn't know before coming. Again, I want to close off the evening by thanking everyone for their NYU Tandon Day support. I know, and Erin Varga is our development person. I know that we're like so excited about reaching our goal tomorrow, and we're doing it because all of you got involved in helping us. So thank you for coming. Thank you for spending a really balmy evening with us. And most of all for making a gift today, because that's really what it's all about. It's about the next generation of our engineers and our science, technology, engineering, and math professionals. So on their behalf, I want to thank you all for being wine drinkers and lovers and spending some time with us. So thank you everyone for being with us. And Bill, we couldn't have done it without you tonight. And Stephanie, of course. I want you to invite us out to California so we can go to the vineyards that you're at. Sounds like a trip. Sounds like an NYU alumni trip to me.
Yes.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a very safe evening. There are better days ahead. And raise a glass and enjoy the rest of the night. Cheers to all of you. And thank you again on behalf of NYU. Sip and celebrate Tandon.
Great job.